Concord Hall had no corners. Every wall curved, every corridor arced, every surface insisted that straight lines were a childish habit. It was architecture as warning: obsidian floors, a ceiling like deep water, and a dome of black glass that pinned the stars overhead like evidence. Commander Imani Cade stood behind the human delegation where security liaisons were expected to be silent furniture. Her uniform was plain by design, no ribbons, no ceremony, because humans had learned the Concord loved symbols almost as much as leverage. Imani kept her hands clasped behind her back and read the room. Crested heads angled in disdain, masks whispering with recycled air, translators pulsing on throats and wrists. They weren't grieving. They were measuring. A chime rippled through the chamber. Concord authority never raised its voice. It simply arrived. High Arbiter Threxel Von drifted into view on a gravity dais, wrapped in translucent robes threaded with legal glyphs. He looked carved rather than born. Narrow face, luminous eyes, the serene confidence of someone who had never been forced to improvise. Proceeding 917, emergency risk adjudication, he said. Matter, Sol system compliance and containment. At the front table, Ambassador Mina Qureshi rose. Mid-50s, sharp-eyed, stubborn enough to argue with vacuum. Today, Mina's jaw was clenched against humiliation delivered as procedure. Threxel lifted a hand. Light unfolded in the air, a trade corridor, icons of civilian traffic, then a blossom of red and static. On Cycle 357, a Concord navigation relay in Corridor Lysa suffered catastrophic failure, he said. 3 transports lost. 214 dead. The forensic board attributes primary cause to an unregistered adaptive mesh released from Sol. A murmur spread, sympathy for the dead, yes, but also relief that the blame had a shape. Imani's comm bead vibrated once. A silent ping from her analyst on the human courier outside. The projection's timestamps didn't match the raw packet. She didn't move. In this chamber, flinching was confession. Mina spoke into her MIC High Arbiter. We submitted our full registry. Nothing in our inventory matches that signature. We've complied with every inspection. Registry is not absolution, Threxel replied. Intent is irrelevant. Outcome governs risk. A delegate with a frilled throat sack leaned forward. Humans call it innovation. We call it contagion. Laughter, brittle and brief. Mina's fingers tightened on the table edge. Earth opened its shipyards. Its labs. Its drives. We allowed your peacekeeping drones over our orbital platforms. We did not hide. Compliance does not erase uncertainty, Threxel said. The hologram shifted, Earth, blue and serene, then overlaid with yellow hazard sigils. Your species expands without consensus, modifies infrastructure without interlock, and refuses stabilizing disciplines that preserve the compact. Imani watched bodies, not faces. Several delegations leaned in at the word disciplines. This was not a trial. It was a lesson in fear. Threxel continued. Motion A. Expulsion of humanity is deemed impractical and likely to provoke destabilizing conflict. Motion B. Containment of the cradle world designated Earth is recommended. Earth will be declared sealed hazard. Lanes interdicted. Protections revoked. Contact restricted. Mina's head snapped up. You can't exile a planet. You can, Threxel said, if your law includes the word world. The room quieted. Somewhere a translator hiccuped, turning a curse into a prayer. Imani caught Threxel's glance toward the cameras, the slight tilt that said this decision was already packaged, labeled, and ready for broadcast to every system tonight. Imani's mind ran logistics. Imports. Medical precursors. Rare isotopes. The chain that kept billions fed and hospitals stocked. A blockade didn't need guns. It needed time. Mina's voice hardened. If you isolate Earth, you condemn civilians. That is collective punishment. Threxel's expression softened into rehearsed compassion. The Concord does not punish. It safeguards. Your people may travel, petition, and resettle under supervised protocols. Vote, Threxel said. Above each delegation, symbols ignited, approve, abstain, deny. Hands, tendrils, neural pulses registered decisions. A line of amber marched around the dome, tallying in silence. Imani watched approvals stack faster than she expected. Species that had traded with Earth for years voted yes without blinking. Others abstained, unwilling to be seen as allies. A few denied, noble and meaningless. The final chime sounded. The dome displayed. Passed. Threxel did not smile. Implementation window. 30 cycles. After that, Sol becomes quarantined territory. Any vessel breaching interdiction will be impounded. Repeat violators will be neutralized. Mina stood as if gravity had doubled. Around her, the human delegates stared, stunned, furious, grief-struck. Along the chamber's rim, Concord security drones repositioned. Mina swallowed. "You're making a mistake." "We are making policy," Threxel said, and ended the session like closing a file. Delegates dispersed, already drafting headlines that would frame Exile as mercy. The humans lingered a heartbeat longer, marked as residue. In the corridor beyond, the human delegation collapsed into a tight knot of voices. "They're starving Earth," an aide hissed. "We should walk out," another said. "Publicly." A younger delegate's eyes flashed. "We have a fleet. We can break a blockade." That sentence was a match held up to gasoline. Imani stepped forward. "No," she said, quiet but absolute. They turned to her. Mina's gaze sharpened. "Commander." Imani kept her tone level. "If we threaten force inside their jurisdiction, they invoke preemptive policing. They seize ships. Freeze assets. Call it self-defense. They want us to swing first." Silence followed, heavy with rage. "So we accept." Someone spat. Imani tapped her comm bead, opening a secure line. A message flashed across her retinal display. Classified, priority red. Project Walkaway active. 30 days. "You're the pin." Imani lifted her eyes. The corridor's curved walls reflected their faces in warped slivers. "They think Earth is our chain," she said. "They just handed us the key." Mina stared a long moment, then nodded once. "All right. Tell me where to stand." Imani glanced toward the exit port where Concord drones hovered like polite threats. She offered them nothing, no anger, no fear, no performance. Only a measured breath. "First," she said, "we stop them from seeing us bleed." Earth didn't panic. That was the first thing the galaxy got wrong. Within an hour of the vote, every major broadcast band across Sol carried the same message, translated into 300 languages and pushed through Concord relay nodes before anyone could accidentally throttle it. A plain room. A plain desk. A tired woman in a simple jacket, sleeves rolled up like she planned to work through the night. Secretary General Hyon Park didn't try to sound brave. She didn't dress the truth in poetry. "Earth has been placed under quarantine by the Galactic Concord," she said, eyes steady on the lens. "They will attempt to isolate us. They will label this as safety. It is pressure. It is leverage." She paused, not for drama, just to breathe. "We are not powerless. We are not alone. And we are not surprised." Behind the broadcast, the real work had already started. Commander Imani Cade watched the feed from a narrow conference room inside Concord Hall's human embassy wing, one of the few corners the Concord hadn't managed to sand smooth. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and sterilized plastic. The table was littered with data pads, scribbled notes, and ration wrappers from a vending unit that didn't understand human appetites. Mina Qureshi stood near the wall display, arms folded tight. Her expression held the strain of someone forced to choose between fury and usefulness. Imani tapped her comm bead. "Patch me to Sol Logistics." A voice answered instantly, clipped and breathless. "Cade. This is Director Harlan Soto. We're green across internal lanes. Concord external lanes still open for now." "How long before they start inspections?" Imani asked. "Soon as their media cycle catches up," Soto said. "They'll dress it as safety. It'll be theft with forms attached." Imani glanced at the wall display. A countdown had already been started, 30 days in red digits. Someone had labeled it with bitter humor. Quarantine lock. 29D 22 hours 11 minutes. Mina's voice cut in. We need leverage. A public campaign. Bring sympathetic worlds to our side. Imani kept her gaze on the data scrolling by. Sympathy isn't fuel. It won't feed Earth. A younger aide, Rafiq, 27, brilliant and permanently offended by injustice, leaned forward. Then what's the plan? Imani didn't answer immediately, because the truth sounded like surrender if you said it wrong. Instead, she opened a file marked in black and white text. Project Walkaway. Contingency Civilization Relocation. The room went quiet, as if the document itself had stolen their breath. Mina stared at the header. That's real. It's been real since first contact, Imani said. Since the Concorde asked us to submit our shipyard manifests and voluntarily share our replication protocols. Rafiq blinked. We planned to abandon Earth. We planned to protect it, Imani corrected. From exactly this. They can blockade a planet. They can't blockade an idea scattered across 1,000 rocks with engines. A new voice joined the call, female, brisk, with the rough cadence of someone who'd argued with machines for most of her life. Commander Cade, the voice said. This is Chief Engineer Lena Voss, Belt Fabrication Authority. I'm on the Walkaway board. If you're seeing this file, congratulations. You've been promoted to problem. Imani allowed herself a faint smile. I was hoping you'd say that. Lena's tone softened only slightly. We have 3 phases. Phase 1 is stockpile and conversion. Phase 2 is distribution. Phase 3 is decoupling. Mina's eyes narrowed. Spell it out. Lena did. Asteroid farms shifted their output priority within minutes. Instead of luxury polymer blends and habitat decor, they began printing pressure seals, medical packaging, and nutrition substrate molds. Every microfactory inside the belt received the same update packet. Emergency recipes, material substitutions, throughput optimizations. The shipyards over Mars stopped making sleek ships that impressed aliens and started producing ugly ones that survived stress. Modular cylinders. Thick hulls. Redundant reactors. Everything built to be repaired by hand with whatever was available. Imani watched the production map bloom. Dozens, then hundreds of nodes lighting green as they accepted new directives. A civilization pivoting without asking permission. Rafiq's voice cracked. How many can we move? Soto answered, grim. Not everyone. The room absorbed that in silence. Even Mina looked away. Imani had seen evacuation math before, on sinking stations, cracked moons, ships bleeding air into black. Numbers had no mercy. They simply refused to lie. Lena spoke carefully now, as if addressing a wound. We don't lift Earth. We lift continuity. We prioritize children, essential labor, medical dependence, and data integrity. The rest stays with supply stabilization and protected infrastructure. Mina exhaled through her nose. Protected how? Concorde guns. No, Imani said. Protected by making the blockade pointless. She stood and pulled up another screen. A series of diagrams showing rings of comm relays, each outside Concorde jurisdiction, forming a redundant mesh that could route signals without touching their networks. Silent lanes, she said. Old navigation. Human math. Dumb transmitters. No Concorde relays to cut. Rafiq frowned. That's illegal. Imani's reply was calm. So is starving a planet. Lena snorted softly. I like her. While Concorde Hall rehearsed its morality play, Sol turned into a machine that refused to die. Earth's oceans kept moving. Crops kept growing. Cities kept humming. Not because people weren't afraid, because they were, but because fear didn't stop work. It sharpened it. Medical labs hoarded precursors, synthesized alternatives, and distributed emergency libraries to every regional clinic. Power plants ran diagnostic cycles and locked in redundancies. Space elevators shifted schedules, prioritizing payloads labeled with dull names that didn't scream importance. Water recycle unit components. Dialysis membrane stock. Neonatal nutrient base. Atmospheric filter cartridges. The mundane became sacred. 2 days into the window, Concord Media caught up. The first broadcast came from a polished anchor with perfect posture and a voice trained to soothe prey. Human evacuation activity has increased dramatically, the anchor said. Observers suggest contamination concerns. Imani killed the feed with a flick. Mina looked up sharply. They're framing us as a hazard. Of course, Imani said. If they can make the galaxy fear us, no one will question the vote. Rafik clenched his jaw. We should respond. We are responding, Imani said, and keyed a channel. A human stream went live, unfiltered, unglamorous, a camera mounted on an engineer's chest. It showed hands tightening bolts on a cargo cradle. It showed a cafeteria line feeding workers. It showed a medical shipment being sealed and scanned. A voiceover, plain as steel, this is what survival looks like. Not weapons. Plumbing. Food. Medicine. Air. The viewers didn't get drama. They got proof. That was when the Concorde shifted tactics. Inspections began. Not on warships. On cargo haulers. On humanitarian transports. The kind with families aboard and cargo bays full of insulin packs and water membranes. Concorde peacekeepers arrived with forms and smiles, delaying departures by hours, then days. Imani joined the comm on the first incident. A Concorde officer appeared on screen, reptilian features softened by an official sash. Commander Cade. This vessel is flagged for verification. Routine. What's the hold reason? Imani asked. Potential contamination. The Concorde must ensure safety. Imani leaned forward. It's carrying neonatal supplies. The officer blinked slowly. Safety protocols apply to all cargo. Then apply them quickly, Imani said. Or admit you're using infants as bargaining chips. The officer's jaw tightened. Your tone is inappropriate. Imani's smile carried no warmth. Your delay is lethal. The line cut. Rafik slammed his palm on the table. They're going to strangle us with paperwork. Imani stared at the ship's manifest. Then her analyst pinged her again, another anomaly in the incident report they'd used to justify the vote. Not the media version. The raw sensor signature. A pattern in the noise, a harmonic ripple shaped like human mesh tech, but imperfect. Like a forgery made by someone who'd studied a blueprint without understanding the tool marks. Imani's pulse slowed, the way it did when chaos finally gave her something solid to grip. Mina, she said quietly. Mina looked up. What? Imani tilted the screen toward her, highlighting the signature. This didn't come from Earth. Rafik leaned in, eyes wide. How do you know? Because if we built it, Imani said, voice turning razor thin, it wouldn't have failed like that. On the wall display, the countdown continued to bleed away. 27D 5 hours 44 minutes. Outside the embassy window, Concorde traffic drifted like indifferent insects. Imani stared at the forged signature and felt something tighten into certainty inside her chest. Not fear, not rage. Resolve. They didn't vote because we're dangerous, she said. They voted because someone wanted the excuse. Lena's voice crackled in her ear, suddenly serious. Commander, tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking. Imani's smile returned, sharper this time. I'm thinking, she said, we're not just going to survive this. She looked at the red digits on the wall. We're going to make them regret wasting 30 days. Concorde Hall kept its archives like it kept everything else, clean enough to pretend nothing ugly had ever happened there. The records chamber sat beneath the main forum, past a corridor lined with polished stone and moving light that mimicked sunrise without committing to warmth. No guards stood in the open. The Concorde didn't believe in intimidation as a visible tool. They preferred rules sharpened into weapons. Imani Cade walked beside Ambassador Mina Qureshi with a visitor badge clipped to her collar, the kind that looked harmless until you noticed the embedded tracking filament. Say it again, Mina murmured as they approached the access gate. Imani didn't slow. We aren't hacking. We're requesting. Legally. Mina's lips tightened. It still feels like breaking in. That's because they've convinced everyone the truth requires permission, Imani said. A sensor lattice swept them, soft light, no sound. A voice like a lullaby issued from the ceiling. Purpose of visit. Mina lifted her chin. Evidence disclosure review under Tribunal Procedure 42, Subclause C. We request full forensic packet access. Corridor LISA relay failure. A pause, long enough to remind them whose oxygen they were breathing. Request accepted. 20 minutes allocated. A panel slid open like a sigh. Inside, the chamber resembled a cathedral built for paperwork. Floating shelves held crystalline data spines. Glyphs shimmered along the walls, changing language for whoever looked at them. In the center stood an interface dais, smooth, featureless, waiting to decide whether you deserved answers. Imani placed her palm on the reader. It tingled, scanning skin chemistry, pulse rhythm, microtremors. Even consent was biometric. 20 minutes, Mina said under her breath. What can you do in 20 minutes? Imani's eyes were already moving. Enough. She'd spent years in rescue work where time was measured in air remaining and temperature drop. The Concorde's limit wasn't a barrier. It was a timer she understood. Pull the raw telemetry, she told the system aloud. Not the summary. Not the tribunal condensation. Raw. The dais shimmered, then formed a holographic lattice of data, vectors, noise spikes, lane charts. It tried to drown her in complexity, the way bureaucracies always did when they wanted you to surrender. Imani didn't blink. She filtered. Narrowed. Cross-referenced the harmonic banding she'd seen on the signature. There it was again, the human mesh pattern, the elegant curve the tribunal had pointed at with horrified fingers. But it was wrong. Not in a way a politician would notice. In a way an engineer couldn't ignore. The signal had an echo, a faint delay as if the system had been imitating human code rather than running it. Like a counterfeit coin that looked perfect until you weighed it. Rafiq's voice crackled in her comm bead from the embassy. Commander, you're in the archive. Working, Imani whispered. Concorde Media's running a fresh segment. They're calling walkaway an armed relocation. Imani's jaw tightened. Let them talk. Mina leaned closer, watching the data. So what does it mean? It means someone wanted the signature to point at us, Imani said. Which means the relay failure wasn't an accident. A new file opened by itself, an embedded reference tag buried beneath the incident stack. It wasn't in the tribunal packet. It wasn't in the public feed. It was internal, contractor equipment registry, LISA corridor maintenance cycle. Imani's pulse gave a small, cold jump. She opened it. Names spilled across the hologram in clean Concorde script. Subcontractors, equipment providers, sensor calibrators. The kind of list meant to bore anyone without suspicion. Then she saw the stamp. Von Judiciary Procurement Oversight. Approved. Mina's eyes widened. That's Threxel's office, Imani finished. Imani scrolled further until she found what she needed, a hardware designation tied to the relay's last maintenance, an adaptive field stabilizer manufactured by Kethron Dynamics, a Concorde-aligned corporate block known for civilian security solutions. Rafiq whistled softly over the comm. Kethron builds black-grade systems. Nobody touches their parts unless the Concorde wants them to. Imani opened the stabilizer spec. The diagrams were technical enough to require a specialist, but the identifiers were universal. Signal modulation ranges, routing logic, replication safeguards. And right in the middle, an optional add-on module listed in sterile language. Mesh emulation package. Sol compatible. Mina stared like the words had teeth. They built a device designed to mimic our tech. They didn't want a mystery, Imani said. They wanted a culprit. The dais chimed. 10 minutes remaining. Of course. The chamber didn't threaten. It reminded. Imani copied what she could into a secure buffer, compressing the files into dense packets. The Concorde watermark tried to attach itself like a chain. She stripped it off with a legal loophole. Public risk review data could not be classified if it impacted civilian safety across member lanes. She didn't break the lock. She used the lock against them. Mina's voice shook, restrained rage held just behind her teeth. If Threxel's office approved procurement, he's either negligent or complicit. Imani didn't answer. She didn't need to. The pattern was forming too clearly to deny. They'd staged a disaster, blamed humans, then offered the galaxy a clean solution. Quarantine the unpredictable species' homeworld. A tidy narrative that made everyone feel safe while the Concorde tightened its grip. 5 minutes remaining, the chamber announced. Imani sent the packet to Lena Voss in the belt and Director Soto in Sol Logistics. A single response blinked back from Lena almost instantly. That's not a mistake. That's a knife. Imani exhaled slowly. When she and Mina stepped out of the records chamber, the corridor felt colder than it had before, not because the air changed, but because the truth had weight. Back in the embassy wing, the mood had shifted from grief to motion. People moved with purpose now, the way crews did when a fire became manageable because it had a source. Mina slammed her palm on the table as the projection appeared. This is treason. Rafik paced like a caged storm. We send it to every delegate. We expose them. Lena's holo flickered into view, belt background behind her, noisy, bright with welding arcs. Her face was smeared with grease. She looked furious in a way that had nothing to do with politics. You expose them, you give them a war they can sell, Lena said. They'll say humans are lashing out. They'll frame every protest as aggression. Soto joined the channel too, his eyes red with lack of sleep. Concorde peacekeepers just boarded a supply hauler out of Titan. They didn't seize cargo yet, but they're testing. Testing what? Mina snapped. Soto's mouth flattened. Our patience. Rafik's fists curled. We can't just take it. Imani leaned forward, hands flat on the table. She let silence settle long enough that they had to look at her. We're not taking it, she said. We're sidestepping it. Mina's brows drew together. Explain. Imani pulled up the walkaway phases and layered the evidence on top. Threxel's procurement oversight, Catherine's emulation module, the forged signature. Here's the trap, she said. They staged an incident to justify the vote. Now they want us to fight for reinstatement. Because begging means we accept their authority. Fighting means we validate their fear. Rafik's voice lowered. And if we prove they lied? They bury it, Lena said bluntly. Or they admit it and still keep the quarantine for safety. Either way, they keep their power. Imani pointed at Earth's icon on the display. Blue, bright, already haloed with Concorde hazard markers. Earth is leverage only if we remain dependent on their lanes and protections. Soto's gaze flicked up. You want to cut the dependence? Imani nodded once. We turn exile into freedom. Mina looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. By leaving the Concorde. By leaving their control, Imani corrected. Their maps. Their permissions. Their trade choke points. Their definitions of legitimacy. Rafik stared. That's enormous. Lena's grin was small, dangerous. That's human. Imani tapped the countdown timer. 21D 8 hours 3 minutes. Here's what we do, she said. We keep the public narrative clean. We keep moving people and supplies. We don't fire. We don't shout. We build the exit while they're watching the door. Mina's voice went quiet. And the evidence? Imani looked at the file again, the one that proved the Concorde's hands were dirtier than their floors. We keep it, she said. Not as a plea. As a notice. Rafik blinked. A notice of what? Imani's smile appeared, slow and precise. A notice, she said, that we know what they did, and we're leaving anyway. Lena leaned in, eyes hard. We announce the Sol Compact. Earth becomes a heritage world, protected by our choice, not their mercy. Soto hesitated. They'll call it retreat. Imani shook her head. Retreat is when you run because you're beaten. This is walking out because the room is rotten. The embassy lights dimmed briefly as Concorde power regulations cycled, another subtle reminder of who owned the building. Mina glanced up at the ceiling and then back to Imani. "Commander," she said carefully, "if we do this, there's no going back." Imani's answer came without hesitation, because it wasn't a decision anymore. It was the only line that kept humanity from wearing a leash forever. "Good," she said. "Then we won't." Outside the embassy viewport, the Concorde's traffic continued to drift through space like nothing had changed. Inside, humanity quietly prepared to vanish from the places the galaxy expected them to need. And far above Concorde Hall, in the silent black between stars, the first unregistered relay buoy ignited. Small, ugly, unremarkable. And impossible to control. The Concorde expected a finale. They expected humanity to arrive dragged by desperation, pleading in a dozen dialects, promising obedience, offering concessions wrapped like gifts. They expected tears in the chamber, shouting in the halls, maybe a threat sharp enough to justify peacekeeping intervention. What they did not expect was a calendar invitation. Final procedural session. Sol quarantine implementation. Confirmation hearing. Imani Cade stood in the human embassy wing and read the notice twice, then once more for the shape of the insult hiding inside its politeness. The quarantine lock was less than 48 hours away. The Concorde wanted a public bow. A ceremonial collaring. Something for history feeds and legal archives. Ambassador Mina Qureshi adjusted her jacket with slow precision. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Exhaustion had burned the excess emotion down to clean embers. "They want us to beg," Mina said. Imani nodded. "They want witnesses." Rafiq hovered near the door with a datapad pressed to his chest as if he could hold the universe together by clenching hard enough. "We could refuse to attend." "We will attend," Mina said, voice flat. "And we will not give them what they came for." The comm bead in Imani's ear clicked. Lena Voss, the last convoy cleared Titan. Supply stabilization is green. Arc modules are spun. Comms mesh is humming. If your speech goes long, keep it under 9 minutes. Our window for the quiet lane jump is tight. Imani kept her reply short. Understood. Soto's voice followed, rough and hoarse. Earth confirmed. Archive vaults sealed. Hospitals stocked. Water recycles locked. Power redundancies online. We're as ready as a planet can be. A pause, then something softer. Cade. People are leaving messages on public boards. Not angry. Grateful. Like they know they're watching the end of something. Imani swallowed once, hard. Tell them the end isn't dying. It's moving. They left the embassy wing without ceremony. Concorde Hall waited like a throat. The tribunal chamber looked identical to the day Earth had been condemned. Same star-filled dome, same curved seats, same serenity built to make defiance feel childish. Delegates filled the tiers, faces bright with anticipation. Threxel Von sat high on his gravity dais, calm as ever, the embodiment of legal inevitability. He inclined his head when the humans approached. "Ambassador Qureshi," Threxel said, "Commander Cade. Your attendance is noted." "Noted," Mina replied, dry as dust. Imani stood behind her, hands loosely clasped. She could feel thousands of eyes on her back. The Concorde did not stare like predators. They stared like accountants, assessing cost. Threxel's voice carried through the chamber without effort. The Concorde will now complete the final procedural record for the Sol quarantine. This is your final opportunity to appeal. Mina stepped forward. Her MIC activated with a soft tone. "High Arbiter," she said, "we will not be appealing." A rustle passed through the tiers, a collective recalculation. Threxel blinked once. "You misunderstand. The quarantine begins in 47 hours. Your homeworld will be sealed. Your people." "Our people are already protected," Mina interrupted. The interruption itself was a shock. Concorde officials spoke in turns. Interrupting was a breach of etiquette so severe it could be called aggression. Several delegates leaned forward as if waiting for security drones to float in and make it stop. Threxel's gaze sharpened. "Protected by what? Your fleet?" Protected by preparation, Mina said. And by choice. Threxel's mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. Explain. Mina didn't. She looked over her shoulder at Imani once, a silent passing of the weight. Imani stepped forward and activated her own MIC. High Arbiter Von, she said, before we proceed, we submit a formal notice for the record. Tribunal Procedure 42, Subclause C, Risk Integrity Clause. Threxel's eyes narrowed. That clause concerns evidence tampering. It does, Imani agreed. Which is why we're using it. A hologram bloomed between them. Clean, concise, impossible to ignore. The procurement stamp. The contractor registry. The Kethran Dynamics module labeled Sol-compatible mesh emulation. The raw telemetry mismatch. The signature that had been used to justify Exile, revealed as an imitation. Imani kept the projection lean. No theatrics. No accusations screamed into the air. Just proof, presented with the deadly calm of someone who understood that reality doesn't need volume. A delegate with translucent fins lifted a trembling hand. High Arbiter, is this accurate? Threxel's expression held. For a heartbeat the chamber was silent enough for Imani to hear her own pulse. Then Threxel spoke, voice smooth as polished stone. Even if procedural irregularities occurred, the outcome remains necessary. Humans are a destabilizing variable. Mina smiled, not kind, not cruel, simply inevitable. There it is, she murmured. Threxel leaned forward. You will not threaten the Concord. Imani's reply was gentle. We're not threatening you. Rafik, sitting behind the delegation table, stared like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. Threxel's voice hardened. Then what is this performance? Imani lifted her chin slightly, eyes moving across the chamber, meeting faces that had voted yes because fear was easier than thought. This isn't a performance, she said. It's a courtesy. A notification that your quarantine is based on manufactured grounds. We are filing it so you cannot claim ignorance later. One of the delegates hissed in agitation. Another whispered to their translator, eyes wide. Threxel's composure cracked, not in anger, but in something rarer, uncertainty. You expect this record to undo the vote? He asked. Mina's answer was a blade wrapped in velvet. No, she said. We expect it to haunt you. Threxel's hands folded. Careful. If you refuse appeal, you concede. Imani shook her head once. You can't make us concede to a system we're no longer part of. A murmur became a swell. Delegates shifted, uncertain where the ground was. Threxel lifted a hand, asserting control. The Concord will declare humanity stateless. Your ships will lose protected lane status. Your colonies will be sanctioned. Your trade will reroute, Lena's voice said, suddenly present. Every head turned. A holo-link flickered on the human side, Lena Voss in her fabrication bay, Sparks behind her, hair tied back, face set with stubborn pride. Hi, Lena said, as if joining a weekly meeting. Just dropping in to confirm, we don't need your lanes. Threxel's eyes narrowed. You cannot sustain civilization outside Concord infrastructure. Lena tilted her head. We already have. Imani tapped her data pad. A second projection unfolded, this one not legal, logistical. Convoys. Belt farms. Modular habitats. Relay buoys igniting across dark space like a new constellation. Supply graphs stabilizing. Evacuation priority lists. Medical production curves. It wasn't propaganda. It was operational telemetry. Mina spoke, voice suddenly soft enough to feel intimate in the vast chamber. The Concord exiled Earth, she said. And for that, we thank you. A delegate barked a startled sound. Thank. Mina continued anyway. You taught us a lesson. That our birthplace can be used as a handle. That our kindness can be mistaken for dependence. She paused, eyes reflecting starlight. So we removed the handle. Threxel rose slowly from his dais. The serene mask slipped, revealing a hint of raw disbelief. You are abandoning your homeworld. Imani answered, careful with every word. We are not abandoning Earth, she said. We are safeguarding it. Earth will become a closed heritage sanctuary under the Sol Compact. No Concord jurisdiction. No foreign leverage. No trade choke points. No negotiation space. Rafik stood then, voice carrying despite his youth. You wanted Earth isolated. Congratulations. Earth is isolated, on our terms. The chamber roared, not with sound, but with overlapping translator bursts, signals, gestures, shock. Threxel's control slipped further. You cannot simply walk away from the Concord. Imani looked at him steadily. We can, she said. Because we built doors where you only build walls. For a long moment Threxel said nothing. Then, in a voice quieter than his usual authority, he asked, where will you go? Mina's smile returned, this time almost human warm. Everywhere, she said. The session ended in chaos. Not violence. Not explosions. Not a dramatic arrest. Just the Concord's greatest fear realized. A major species refusing to be managed. As Imani and Mina left the chamber, the drones along the corridor didn't move. The Concorde could seize diplomats, sure. They could confiscate ships still in their ports. But the real fleet was already gone. Far above Vera's neutral orbit, on a route not recorded in Concorde maps, human arc carriers slipped into the dark, quiet, unannounced, engines tuned to minimal signature. Imani watched through the embassy viewport as the last human vessel drifted away like a departing thought. Her comm bead clicked again. Soto's voice, thick with emotion. Earth just shut down the Concorde relays. Voluntarily. Imani closed her eyes for a second, feeling the weight of it. Any unrest? She asked. Soto exhaled. No. People are standing on rooftops. Watching the sky. Like they're saying goodbye to a ship leaving harbor. Imani opened her eyes. Outside, the stars didn't change. They never did. That was their gift. Mina stepped beside her, quiet. Do you think the Concorde understands what just happened? Imani watched the human fleet's faint lights wink out one by one. They will, she said. Not today. Not tomorrow. She let the silence breathe. But soon enough, they'll realize the worst part wasn't losing Earth. Mina glanced at her. Imani's voice dropped to something almost tender. The worst part, she finished, is that they lost the right to matter to us.